And we are happy to welcome into our studio Robert Nixon, the former leader of the Ontario Liberals, former treasurer of the province of Ontario, and it's really a pleasure to have you in that chair. 50 years and 2 weeks since you were first elected a long time ago. Welcome.
Doesn't seem very long, Steve.
I'm glad to hear that. You are, in some respects, a lot like Dalton McGuinty insofar as what got you into politics was the death of your father, who held the seat before you. That was the same story with him. Can you take us back to 50 plus years ago and what was going on in your head about why you wanted to run for this thing while your father had just died?
Good question, because my dad had not been ill at all, but he had told me that he didn't intend to run again. He'd been a member of the legislature for 42 years, served in a cabinet back in 1919, can you believe it?
Longest serving MPP ever.
It's right, and was briefly premier in 1943, so he had an extremely interesting career and served through the Great Depression, which left some scars, political and otherwise, as far as that was concerned. But he was a great hero of mine, I can tell you. And I used to, after I was 16, I used to be driving him around to political meetings, and he would be introduced and speak to a throng of 27 Liberals or 47 Liberals. And
those were tough days for Liberals.
I would lead the claque from the back road, but I heard him in speaking many times, and I enjoyed him. We had a good time.
You and Mr. Davis had a heck of a rivalry, didn't you? And is it fair to say you never really were particularly friendly with each other over the years?
We didn't. We got along okay, and we faced each other across the house okay, and we lived through it okay, and it's now history.
and you love coming into the studio and seeing his picture on the wall. Because we named the studio after him. It's okay. Here's what happened in 1975, which was the next election results. Michael, let's bring these up, because it was, oh, so close. 1975 election saw Bill Davis's Tories win 51 seats. That was knocked down to a minority government. He only got 36% of the total votes. The NDP came second. Stephen Lewis, 38%, with only 29% of the total votes. And there were you in third place, 35 seats, so third in the seat count, but actually only 2 points behind Bill Davis with 34% of the total votes. That's your first past the post system, eh? Sometimes some strange results. Why didn't you guys win that election? You were poised to win that election.
I think it was the strength of Stephen Lewis. It wasn't really being defeated by Bill Davis in that sense. That Stephen Lewis was a transcendental politician, an outstanding speaker, and just made a huge impact on the province. And I was still sort of plowing along, which is probably the right verb to use.
Because you're a farmer.
Yeah.
Well, here we go again. You stepped down after that 75 election loss in 76. You've been on the opposition benches at this point for 14 years. You will spend another decade in opposition, as it turns out. Did you think you would be there forever?
Yeah. But well, and then David Peterson came along, and I remember sitting beside him in the legislature in opposition. We became, you chat back and forth, and I enjoyed his company and so on. And he went for the leadership, and other things changed, and the election was coming along, and actually Bill Davis got up to make an announcement. I thought of the election, and he said, well, I'm not announcing an election, I'm announcing my resignation.
I want to show some tape at this point. This is on the south lawn of Queen's Park on the 26th of June, 1985. And here's a picture of Robert Fletcher Nixon being sworn in as the new treasurer of the province of Ontario. What do you remember about that day?
We were outside, the sun was shining. One of my strong supporters, there were a lot of my buddies there, and of course my family, our family. But when it was all done, we shook hands all around, and I was sworn in as treasurer of Ontario. And I walked down the laneway into the front part of the Parliament buildings, Queen's Park, and found my way across the busy Queen's Park oval circle, and went in the front door, and first time in the Leslie Frost building, the Treasury of the province of Ontario. And there was a guard there, and I said, I'm Mr. Nixon. And he said, oh, is that so? Good for you. Anyway, I said, I'm looking for the minister's office. And he said, oh, that'd be the 7th floor. So I went upstairs. And I think by that time, the deputy had stirred himself around, and they showed me into a very pleasant office that looked right out. It even had a balcony. It looked right out on the Ontario Hydro Moog building. So it was just kind of a full circle all around.
Some people described you as a parsimonious old farmer or fart, one of the two, and others described you as a tax and spend liberal. Which of those do you think is the most accurate?
I was sensible, knowledgeable, careful, democratic, and a great success.
I'm not sure that was one of the choices. I think the choices were parsimonious old farmer, parsimonious old fart, or tax and spend liberal.
Well, you may remember that one of my budgets, we raised the sales tax from 7 to 8%. And a person could say, well, that's just 1%. But of course, it was a huge increase in tax and brought in a lot of revenue. And I did that because I said to my colleagues, if we're going to proceed with these programs, we're going to have to raise taxes. And we paid for the additional expenditures, and I probably could list a few of them for you, from that increase. And I noticed that nobody has reduced the sales tax back to 7%. Bob Ray is defending, I notice, and I'm a good friend of his, and now that he's a liberal, I'm a strong supporter of his, like a serious supporter of his.
Which some part of me finds weird, given that he's responsible for ending your time in government.
Well, the thing that weakens my strength is that here I was leading the remains of the Liberal Party after that disastrous election for us. And Premier Ray walked over just after prayers in the legislature while people shuffling around and leaned on my desk and said, you wouldn't be interested in that job in London, England as our provincial representative, would you? I said, well, I'll have to consider it. Yes.
Considered it for about a second.
For about a second, and I don't know. I don't think the Liberal Party felt abandoned. After all, we were regrouping, and we selected a leadership. One of my colleagues took over and handled it very well, and so on. And meanwhile, Dorothy and I went to London, and had an extremely interesting time. I'll never forget it. Made extremely good friends, and I think did a wonderful job selling Ontario white beans, selling Ontario apples, doing all sorts of stuff that I think was productive, and I liked it.
So 1991, you resigned from the legislature, and as we indicated, somebody named Nixon had been representing Brant riding from 1919 to 1991. 2 years later, there's another Nixon in politics, daughter Jane, who's in the green room, who
Yes.
brought you in today. Daughter Jane runs federally, becomes a cabinet minister in Jean Chrétien's government. And I want to know when that moment came where she went to you, I presume, and said, Dad, I'm thinking about a third generation of Nixons in public life. What'd you say to her?
I don't think she said that. I think she said...
She wouldn't have put it that way, of course.
I think she said, I'm going to seek the nomination. I think I'd already committed my support to another local person. So there's a little difficulty there getting that straightened out. But anyway, because there was very hotly contested when she decided to seek the nomination. And but she won it and then won it and then won it. And she did very well down there. And Mr. Chrétien appointed her to the cabinet, and she had some terrible problems there. I mean, just, but she did a wonderful job, and we're totally proud of her. And I say that because she's watching on the screen now.
As you look back on it these many years later, how disappointed are you that you never became premier?
Oh, I don't feel disappointed. Sometimes as I would be driving into Queen's Park going up University Avenue, and you look at the Parliament buildings there and you think, boy, I would like to be the premier of the province, because there's a lot of things. I can't say there were goals and aims that were in my mind that were not in anybody else's mind, but to actually operate the business of the province and move toward the betterment of the community was a very fulfilling thing to consider, and a proper goal and aim for any man or woman who is looking for a career. The idea that the politician goes in with one thing in his mind to do something to the schools or do something to northern development, that's nuts. It's got to be a general approach to a thoughtful and considerable business in the province of Ontario, its relationship with the rest of Canada and the world, and it must be the best job going.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.